Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and today I'm here to review Children of Blood and Bone. This will be a non-spoilery review, so if you haven't read the book yet, you can absolutely watch it without any fear of being spoiled for any major plot points or anything like that. So before I get into the synopsis of Children of Blood and Bone, I do want to point out that it's an own voices novel. It's about Black women and it's written by a Black woman, so maybe I'm not the best person to be reviewing it if I'm your first review that you're watching. In the description box below, I have a couple of reviews, both written and video, that were written by Black people about this book, and I think that their voices are the ones that should be uplifted when talking about it. So before you even watch this video, I recommend that you check those videos out and those reviews out because they're all really good and they probably describe some things way better than I could. But if you're still interested in what I have to say, then stick around. Children of Blood and Bone follows our protagonist Zélie, who is a Magi. And a Magi is a person who has control over some sort of magic. They are recognizable because they have bright white hair. One day, magic disappeared and a ruthless king went on a rampage where he basically killed off anyone who could use magic. Because Zélie was under 13 years old, her magic still hadn't manifested, so she was spared the killing, but her mother wasn't. And her death haunts Zélie to this day. When the story begins, Zélie is almost an adult and magic is still gone. She and other Magi like her are treated basically as, I don't even want to say second class, they're basically third class citizens, and there's an enormous amount of prejudice against them. Because of her status as a Magi, Zélie's family is taxed more heavily and they're extremely poor. And one day, Zélie goes to try to sell a fish on the market to try to make it so that her family will basically survive the next taxing season. And she runs into a princess called Amari, and the story sort of goes from there. I apologize for that really kind of terrible synopsis. Other people have definitely said it a little bit better, but I don't want this to be spoilery in the slightest, so I didn't want to give away what I think is the biggest point of the plot. Basically, the only other thing you have to know from this point is all of a sudden there is perhaps a way to bring magic back, and Zélie seems to be the one who has to do it. So if you can't tell, I really enjoy Children of Blood and Bone, from the characters to the world building to the plot to the themes. It was all absolutely phenomenal, and I'm going to tell you why piece by piece. We're going to keep this rather formulaic. So starting with character, our main character Zélie is definitely the star on the scene. Children of Blood and Bone is written in multiple perspectives, but I think that Zélie's were the most intriguing to read. And the story is really kind of about her and her journey to bring magic back, not only for herself, but for the other Magi that have been oppressed in Orisha thus far. Zélie is very skilled in some respects and very not skilled in others. She's really rather three-dimensional in that she definitely has strengths that she knows how to use and weaknesses that she has a great difficulty overcoming. It's not like, oh, she's just automatically good at everything and everything goes her way. She very much has to grow as a character and work for those new strengths to become strength. I think my favorite part of Zélie is how honest she is about her status in Orisha, which isn't very good. I changed my mind. I'm going to hold it because you guys deserve to see how beautiful this cover is. Zélie is very honest about her current status and the status quo of life in Orisha. And part of that honesty manifests in this really realistic, I think, insecurity that she has. Zélie worries a lot that she's not going to be able to do the things that she's sort of destined to do. Basically, for her whole life, she's believed that she can't really do anything well, that she's constantly screwing up, and it shows. She's got this very real insecurity that I think is really relatable to any teenage girl anywhere. I think Tomi Adeyemi did a really good job of showing Zélie as a human girl who's been thrust into a situation that she's not sure that she's prepared for, but who's gonna try to do it because it's the right thing to do. My very favorite character is actually not Zélie, but Amari, who is the princess that Zélie meets and starts the whole story off with. At first, I was really angry at Amari. She would say and do things that I was just like, why aren't you better? And then I realized that the reason I was so frustrated with her is because she is the most like myself. I related to Amari more than any of the other characters in the story. Amari is very privileged at the start of this story, and she's definitely one of the complacent non-Magi people in Orisha, which I guess sort of comes with, you know, being the princess and the daughter of the man who created this sort of oppressive regime. But despite all that, she's trying her very best to learn and grow and become a better person than her father and her family expects her to be. She starts off very fearful and insecure, the same as Zélie, but then she grows, she defeats that fear, and she realizes that she's worth more than anyone thought she could ever be worth. And despite everything, despite all their differences, she becomes such a fiercely loyal friend to Zélie, and I think that Zélie really needed that. Amari is everything to me. I love her so much. The two other main characters of Children of Blood and Bone were Zane, Zélé's brother. They have such an honest sibling relationship where they're constantly like roasting each other and making fun of each other. If you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, Zéle and Zane's dynamic is very much like Katara and Sokka from Avatar. And the last main character is Prince Inan, who is Amari's older brother. And if we continue with the Avatar similarities, he reminds me a lot of Prince Zuko. He's a little bit misguided, a lot of bit misguided, but his heart is truly in the right place, and everything he does because he thinks it's for the best of his people. All of the characters were really fleshed out and realistic feeling. They all had their own motivations that were separate from the plot, which I always like because any sort of depth like that makes me relate to the characters a little bit more. So as far as characters go, 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I want to talk about the world building, which was actually a really big part of the story. Children of Blood and Bone was a very hero's journey-like story, so there was a lot of traveling from place to place. Each city mentioned is actually so rich and different from all the other cities, both in the people that are there and how they act, and also just the way it looks, and the descriptions were so vivid and beautiful to read. One thing that helped me personally a lot was the map. Because there was a lot of traveling going on, it really helped me pinpoint where people were going and how they were getting there. And it was just really useful as a guiding device. Like, there was occasionally some issues with traveling speeds, like they'd get from, I don't know, point A to point B in like 3 days, but then from point B to point C in 20 minutes, and it was just like, are you sure about that? But honestly, I was more concerned with the plot moving forward than that, so it didn't really detract anything. Another thing that I really loved was that there were little bits of dialogue here and there, small lines thrown in that let you know that there was a world in this world that goes beyond the borders of Orisha. So often in young adult high fantasy, the world is entirely condensed into the area covered by the map, and there's just nothing else. It's just one island in the middle of a sea, and that's the entire universe. And I'm really glad to know and to have proof that there are other places in this world that can be explored. And I think because of the scope of the story that we'll eventually get to see some of those places and see how they're both different and similar to Orisha. I think that those dynamics are going to be absolutely fantastic, like the cultural differences. Oh, it's gonna be good. Also, the animals. I'm telling you guys, this book gives me such Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes. So Zéle has a lioness, which is essentially like a carnivorous appa from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she rides it, and it's like her animal companion, and I'm a sucker for animal companions in books, so it's just a really good time to read. So world building, also 5 out of 5 stars. Moving on to the plot. There is so much going on in Children of Blood and Bone. The action is non-stop, like it continues happening from scene to scene. There's always something going on. Even when there's little bits of downtime, and they are few and far between, let me tell you, it still feels tensionful and like it's moving the story forward. There's never any breaks just for the sake of breaks. Everything fits together properly. Tomi Adeyemi is such a tight plotter. I think that because of how tightly plotted and how action-packed it is, Children of Blood and Bone is going to make an amazing movie. Like, the plot of this is going to translate so well to the screen to the point where I don't think they're even going to have to cut anything because of how quickly things happen. In fact, my only real complaint with this story is that some things felt a little bit too fast, but those are mostly character things rather than plot things. So some of the relationships that form in Children of Blood and Bone feel a little bit too fast for belief. There were some insta friendships, and there was definitely a bit of insta love, and my suspension of disbelief was just not strong enough to believe it 100%. Like, I would have understood if it just stayed like insta lust. Like, being attracted to somebody is definitely a thing that can happen in a very short amount of time, but saying the L word, are you sure about that? That being said, the speed of these relationships will be perfectly translated in movie form, so plot 4.999 out of 5 stars. And finally, I just want to touch on themes really quick, and this is going to be a really short section because I can't talk about this for too long without getting very spoilery. So Children of Blood and Bone is a high fantasy, but it is so much more than that. It addresses issues like slavery and racism and colorism, which is a thing that I actually haven't seen addressed in books. If racism is addressed, very rarely will like light skin privilege be a thing that's even a little bit mentioned. In addition to that, there is some pretty strong discourse about classism, and I think most valuably, the complacency of liberal allies. I don't want to go into detail about any of those things because that's dwelling far too close to spoiler territory, and I want everybody to read this book and to experience it basically blind and enjoy it for that. So I'm just gonna finish off by saying it's so relevant to this day and age, but without feeling like this discourse and these issues are being presented just cuz. Like, it's very much not in there just to be in there. The themes are inextricable from the plot and characters and story. They're central to the main idea of Children of Blood and Bone, and I think that's what makes them so strong, and I'm absolutely delighted about it. Themes, 10 out of 5 stars. So overall, if you haven't guessed, I gave Children of Blood and Bone a 5 out of 5 stars, maybe like a 4.999, where that point like 00, Infinity Zeros 1 is, why is there insta-love? But then my heart is like, but the rest of the story was so good, and I ignored that insta-love bit, and I want to give it a full 5 out of 5 stars. And you know what? That's what I think I'm gonna go with, because it's just such a good story. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list on the #1 spot for like a month now, and that's amazing. Since its release, it's been up there, and I think that it couldn't be more deserved. Alrighty guys, that's it for me. Thank you for putting up with my rambling. I hope that this is a little more eloquent by the time that I go and edit it, but for now I feel like it's just a mess of me loving this book and hoping to convince you guys to love it as well, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, maybe give it a thumbs up, and if you liked me, maybe consider subscribing. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.